podcast. I am one of your hosts, Alicia,
And I'm Ace.
and we are joined today by Mark Toggle. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm in good spirits. Yourself?
We're doing pretty good. Pretty good. It's another beautiful day on the island of Hawaii. Sun is shining, birds are tweeting, so all is good. All is good. So we have a lot to get into. We would love to know more about the work you're doing, and we're gonna have some deep conversations. But at first, let's just chat about who you are, Mark. What's your story? Because we're getting to know you, and our audience is getting to know you. So if you could just share whatever's on your heart about you and where you're from, your story.
Well, I was born and raised in Southside Chicago in the summer of 1960. I've got three brothers and three sisters. I'm the fifth out of seven. Come from a two-parent household. And as a kid, as a teenager, I was physically and sexually and verbally abused more than once. And it left me with a lot of hurt and pain and trauma. I didn't know how to handle the feelings that I went through, and I didn't have a language for it. But I look back now, I realize I felt um, ashamed and I felt broken. I felt confused. I felt dirty. I felt empty. I felt frightened. I felt lonely. I felt misunderstood. I felt sad. I felt unworthy. Had a lot of conflicting feelings, and that trauma led me to drinking and drugging. Um, I'm alcohol and drug free over 30 years, which is a miracle.
Amazing.
Um, and God has transformed my private pain into public purpose. And so I grew up with a lot of secrets in my family, and family and secrets are a dangerous combination because when you tell a secret, it can break your family. But when you keep a secret, it can break your spirit. And I was homeless, jobless, penniless, just a lost soul, But I had a friend who I trusted, one of the few people I trusted. She suggested that I join an HIV positive support group because I also was diagnosed with HIV 30 and a half years ago. She suggested a holistic health practitioner, and she also suggested seeing a therapist. And this is in December of '94. So at that time, I thought therapy was for rich, crazy white people, which is not an uncommon perspective for melanated people like myself.
Mm.
But because I was attracted to her spirit, I was willing to take her suggestion. And it was just one of the many things that led me to this interview with you, that there are people who became a part of my tribe, a part of my village, who helped me to heal the hurt in my heart a day at a time, a moment at a time. So many people. It led me to this healing and fulfillment and joy and purpose and service. Muhammad Ali says that service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. And so it is my intention to be of service. And so today I'm an author, I'm an educator, filmmaker, I'm a mentor, I'm a poet, soon to be a documentarian. So there's a lot going on. But that's kind of like my story in less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I think there's so many directions that we could go to talk about, to connect some of the things that you talked about. But my favorite part of it is, the story of resilience. You took something where that was, I don't know how you want to look at it, as a deficit, a struggle, a series of struggles. And now you use the experience that you went through to contribute to other people's lives. And I was wondering if you could talk or add a little bit more about how did that transition take place? I know you mentioned you had some folks in your lives, but how did you get from being somebody who is caught up in the struggle to helping other people with their struggle and, obviously helping yourself along the way?
Well, just taking her suggestions, joining an HIV positive support group gave me a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of equality. We would check on each other. We held each other accountable. And then being in therapy really helped me a lot. And my therapist was 26, female, heterosexual, from Bosnia. We're completely opposites, but it was the first time in my life where I felt safe to speak my truth. And I learned how to prioritize my mental health. I learned how to say no without feeling guilty. I learned how to establish healthy boundaries in my relationships. I learned how to be assertive. I learned how to take a look at the part I played and all the resentments I have been harboring towards so many people. That's just part of the journey, and then God just put people in my life that are like-minded, share some of the same beliefs and values. And along the way, I just started to feel hope and encouragement and feel like I wasn't lost anymore. So there's been so many people that have helped me get to this moment. It's just, I couldn't even begin to name them. But just being here with you is an honor because I get to share my experience, and I hope that there's one person who can identify with something I've said, so they'll feel less afraid, less ashamed, less alone.
Yeah. And I think the important part about like therapy, I think we make it too complicated a lot of the time, right? We think about like what kind of intervention do we need to do? And the parts you said about just having a safe place to talk and having connection, like finding a connection with somebody where you could just process through everything. I mean, the amount of stuff that you've been through as a child into adulthood, and then to start talking about that stuff, you need safety and you need someone you can connect with. And I think we make therapy too complicated sometimes, where if we just go back to like, this is another human being in my space, and I can create a safe space for them, help them connect, help them to connect with themselves too, right? And go from there, And I also saw you a little bit from your book when you were talking about therapy outside of therapy. And I think that's really important because the framework I go from that I created in therapy is very much about what can people do outside of the therapy room? Someone may be coming for an hour a week, but what can they do outside of all of that? And the way I think about it is just seven ways that you can take care of yourself, and like movement and looking at your self-love, looking at community and connection and nature and those sort of things. And I've heard you talk about those things as well in yoga too. And I wondered how much has that stuff helped you on top of the therapy you had, but like the therapy outside of therapy?
Well, it continues to help me, exercise, nutrition, like you said, nature, yoga, acupuncture, talking with friends, laughter. Laughter is soul food, and it's free. You don't need insurance to laugh.
Yes.
And sometimes I'll just put on my favorite comedians, Richard Pryor, Robin Harris, Patrice O'Neal, and it just shifts my mood because depression is a mood disorder. It's a mental illness. And it's different for everybody because sometimes it's seasonal. I was diagnosed with mental illness. So I have this clinical diagnosis, this chemical imbalance. And I have moments when I feel really sad, or I feel alone, I feel isolated. Sometimes I feel invisible, and just connecting with laughter, talking to my friends. I have friends I can call at 2:00 in the morning, which is a blessing. I know some people don't, and just being out here in terms of doing podcasts with the book and as an educator, just connecting with other people, other organizations, they share with me, their ancestral wisdom, their cultural norms, what do they do? Like some people play the drums, I like to dance. There's art therapy, there's book therapy, there's hip hop therapy, dance therapy. It's not just talking to a professional because sometimes that can be so daunting, and not everyone can afford to see a professional, and not everyone's interested. Therapy is not a one-size-fits-all thing. Sometimes we tend to blame and shame people who choose not to do therapy in a conventional sense.
Yeah.
So just the examples that you mentioned, there's so many ways to heal the heart and the soul, but sometimes people don't have access. They don't have information. So in my book, I have resources that people can use so they can answer 3 questions. What can I do? Where can I go? And who can I talk to?
I love that. What can I do? Where can I go? Who can I talk to? And you've brought different perspectives from different people to help answer those questions in the book. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It's incredible. How did that come about? And how did you kind of connect with those individuals that are now in the book?
Well, about 5 years ago, God put this idea on my spirit I wanted to write about my own personal mental health journey. I've been procrastinating for a long time, but I just thought it was time for just to express maybe a poem or haiku. And I called a friend of mine who's also an artist, and he suggested that I include other brothers to take the burden off of myself. It wouldn't be a solo project. So I went online and started connecting with people who I thought might be interested. I introduced myself, and they said yes. They said yes, they were interested, and I got 30 men from across the country to share their
Wow.
experiences. Most of them I've never met, never had a telephone conversation. We live in a digital world. People don't pick up the phone the way they used to.
Mm-mm.
I'm 64. I got a baby face.
You look
And I'm used
amazing.
to talking to people on the phone, but there's so many social media platforms, and thank God for connection, but you can't get a hug from a laptop.
Mm-mm.
So sometimes what's missing from my perspective is the affection and the intimacy that you don't get in a physical space. Like I see you, you see me, we're in different parts of the world, but it's a hug and a touch can heal so much
Yes.
in addition to a conversation. So I think that's important too.
Mm-hmm. It really can. We talk about that all the time because a lot of our work, I mean, pretty much all of our work right now is online on laptops. And it's awesome that we can connect with people across the ocean. But like you say, you can't get that physical touch or just even the energy in the room. It's like limited to know the energy in your room right now versus our room and to connect that and to find alignment between that energy. And yeah, I think I always say we're so connected, but we've never been more disconnected than we are now because we rely so much on this, on the camera and the screen. And I do worry about that. And we always talk about how can we balance that with making sure we have a lot of local connections and doing local work too, as well as the online global stuff.
I was at a family reunion and there were a bunch of teenagers and they were all on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
No one was having a conversation. And one person was in this corner, one person was in that corner, and they were all isolated through social media. And I think that's a danger when you're young and all you know is LOL.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really know how to communicate. In this global world, I think it's important to know how to express yourself in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying it's bad, but it's a concern when young people only use social media to communicate and express themselves.
Yeah.
When you go for a job interview, when you go to school, when you're out in the world trying to create, you're going to have to learn, in my opinion, some verbal expression. And if you can't pay your phone bill, you can't use phone anyway.
Right.
And trying to keep up with the latest and the greatest and the hippest and the coolest, that's pressure right there.
Mm-hmm.
My phone is doper than yours,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest things we take for granted with the rise of technology and post-pandemic is the things that you lose along the way. And while we may be able to connect, which is awesome for us to connect from Hawaii to Harlem, at the same time we're often losing the physical,
Mm-hmm.
sharing the physical space, the physical connection. And I know you're a little bit older than me, but obviously we remember the times where to get a hold of somebody you had to actually call their house and talk to their family probably to get to them, or you had to go and knock on the door and talk to their family to get to them. And so there were a lot more opportunities for natural natural connection in person or like I said, verbally on the phone. One of the things that you talked about earlier, which I think we should dive into just a little bit, is the feeling, when you were younger of being alone and not having anybody to talk to. And even when you're talking about, I can't remember how you said it, but the therapies for, rich white people or wealthy white people. And I was a poor white kid and it felt the same way for me, to be honest with you. It felt like this kind of esoteric it wasn't whoever it was for, it wasn't for kids like me. And I'm one of those people that it never really did work out for. There's lots of success stories with therapy. But for me, it's never really quite worked out. And I remember as a child feeling very similar to what you're talking about feeling alone, feeling like there's, who am I going to talk to about the way that I'm feeling? I didn't feel like people understood me. And I reference this poem a lot from Tupac. It's called Sometimes I Cry. And he says, sometimes when I'm alone, I cry because I'm on my own. The tears I cry are bitter and warm, and they flow with life but take no form. I cry because my heart is torn, and I find it difficult to carry on. If I had an ear to confide in, I would cry among my treasured friends. But who do you know that stops that long to help another carry on? The world moves fast, and it would rather pass you by than to stop and see what makes you cry. It's painful and sad, and sometimes I cry, and no one cares about why. And I think it's obvious why I brought that poem up, but I think, as I think one of the best things that we can do, like practicing revolutionary social work, is to try to empathize with others. And I know if I look at myself as a kid, as this white kid that looked at therapy as this thing that wasn't for me and that they wouldn't understand me, then, I can only imagine what it might be for a young Black male, to how they might feel in this, a similar or the same circumstance. And so I was just wondering if you could speak to that, the issue of loneliness. And we're talking about how we're more connected now, but you could be alone in a room with other people now because you could be isolated, like you said, via the phones and social media and whatnot. So I think, loneliness is a strong of it, if we want to use like something like an epidemic or a problem, as it's ever been right now.
It is. And thank you for referencing that Tupac poem. It's one of my favorite artists. I just love the fact that he was so transparent and vulnerable. As a young, he was only 25 years old, when he transitioned. But yeah, loneliness is something I have struggled with. And it goes back to just being a kid and feeling like nobody knows my name. When I was 3 years old, I went to private school. Everyone else in my neighborhood went to a public school. So I was socialized differently from age 3 to age 9. And some of the kids thought I wanted to be white because I was a good student. So culturally, that was traumatizing. I didn't understand why people would think that about me, that because I was a good student, that I wanted to be somebody different. And that made me feel different. And then I didn't know how to cope, with the feeling of isolation, the feeling of being different, the feeling of being menaced by people who look like me. That was even more confusing. So here I am doing well in school, not bothering anybody. I'm not an angel, but the kids in my neighborhood would call me out, and so I would be in the library a lot. That's where I discovered James Baldwin, who inspired me to become a writer, because I just didn't feel safe. I never felt safe as a kid. So not feeling safe made me lonely. And we would play hide and go seek. And I remember kids would they would hide behind a car, they would hide behind a tree, they would hide behind a building. I would go to the park and come back 3 hours later. I just felt so alone and so lonely and so isolated. And I had no one I felt that I could talk to. And those feelings have haunted me for decades. And so part of being in therapy and going to support groups and talking with friends and doing writing and being of service has helped me to work through all of that pain and trauma. And so I'm a lot better off today, but it can creep up from time to time. My feelings are not my friends. Feelings are energy that flows through my body, and at any given moment, that trauma can resurface. It could be a song, it could be a TV show, it could be a neighbor, it could be a side eye from somebody. I could be on the train, somebody says something to me, and once again, I'm triggered. I'm triggered, and here comes that feeling again, and I got to deal with it in a way that's loving and nurturing. I got to hug myself, and So thank you for that question, because it's still a challenge.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way that you talk about it too, in the sense of, we can speak for myself. I find myself in middle adulthood, where I have a lot of the things I never even imagined that I would have, a beautiful wife, a beautiful family, a really nice job, people that respect me. And sometimes, actually quite often still to this day, I'll wake up, or like you said, I'll be somewhere and some incident will happen. Um, and those old feelings will come back. And sometimes I just wake up with those feelings, this feelings of like being cursed or worthlessness or this or that. And it doesn't reflect my current situation or my current life. And so you have to be, I'd say, I don't know, very vigilant, you know what I mean, to be kind to ourselves, and realize that sometimes we're gonna feel a certain way, and it's gonna be connected to our past and our past experiences. And we've got to find a way to be kind to ourselves and take care of ourselves through all that, because you can, no matter how much success or how much you achieve or however much you obtain, those same things can still haunt us and make us feel worthless. And it's still something that I struggle with often. And I got to talk myself through it. And so just hearing you talk about it, Mark, just made me feel better about it. Knowing that somebody else out there, still goes through those things as well. And I think that's one of the important and powerful part of having these kind of conversations, is that there's always somebody out there that has been feeling the same, or something's going through something similar, than you are yourself. And that tends to lead to us feeling less alone too, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that all human beings have the same feelings.
Yep.
But if we don't talk about them, we'll never know how anyone feels. So if I decide that no one feels like me, I'm going to believe that no one's going to understand, no one's going to care, no one's going to respect me. And then feelings become secrets. And that's what makes it really painful, is just the secrets. Then I realize is, by doing this book, for example, all these men, they all have the same feelings. And you don't have to have a disorder to feel depression. But when my father transitioned, that depression is very different than being depressed because I don't have any money in my pocket.
Mm.
So I had to learn about discernment when it comes to my emotions. I can feel sad because, the Knicks lost. Or I can feel sad because I can't find my keys. It's the same feeling, but it can take on a different meaning depending on my perspective and the way I internalize it. And that's why it's important to have these conversations and to connect with people around the world to realize that we have so much in common in terms of our human fallibility.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think division, it harms us on so many levels. I mean, there's a lot of ways division is harming us right now, but on this basic level of making us feel as though we're all different and we need to be parts of these separate groups, and forgetting that we're all human and that we all have emotions, feelings, thoughts, difficulties, different challenges, but challenges, and I always struggle with the division that comes up and separates us from connecting in this way. And that's been such a blessing with this podcast, is just to connect with so many different people from all over the world and remind us and anyone that's listening that we are all human. And yeah, we miss out on that a lot.
Yeah. When I was in therapy, honestly didn't know what was going to happen. So I asked my therapist, how can you help me? And she said, I'm here to assist you with the quality of your life. And in that moment, it was so profound. It didn't matter that we were different.
Mm.
Even though I felt broken emotionally, what she said and just her, she was just so tender. Like sometimes I just need a pillow, not a pizza. And she just was so comforting in that moment when I needed, because I don't always know what I need when I need something, just because of how I used to deal with life and my feelings. I have a little maturity, but I didn't know. But those words just made me feel like, okay, this is the right place for me.
Mm.
But there are other Black men who will sit in front of a therapist, and after one session, that's it. They're done.
Yeah.
And I understand. It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. But it helped me, but it doesn't help everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I know you talk in your book a bit about some different myths and things like that regarding masculinity and power, and kind of reframing those subjects. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
About masculinity and power.
Just about, I think, reading a little bit of excerpts from your book, it seemed like you reframed some things. You were talking about how it can be common to think that you have to be resilient all the time, versus being willing to ask for help or to seek that out. And some of the, I think, myths around masculinity and whatnot, it seems all to be connected to me.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, my ancestors were enslaved against their will, and they had to work from Kansas City in the morning, Kansas City at night. And I think some of us still take on that energy, is having always to work. People working 3 jobs and still broke. But we're taught to believe that the job makes you a man. Or if you have a degree, if you have a car, a man is what you can purchase, for example. And I believe in energy. There's different types of energy, and the term masculinity, honestly, I don't think it serves men of African descent. Honestly, that's another conversation. I don't really think it's useful anymore. I think it's more like you talked about division. I don't think it unites us as brothers, because there's so many ways of expressing what we've been taught. And I'm in the place of unlearning what I was taught about masculinity, about manhood, what makes me a man. So there is a certain amount of power, but hopefully that power is used to be of service and not to harm anyone. Not to abuse someone because of your gender. So that's masculinity. There's a term called toxic masculinity, which, in my opinion, is rooted in anti-Black misandry. We never talk to other groups of people about their masculinity. Why is it just Black men who are supposed to perform this type of masculinity all day long? I don't think that's fair. So honestly, I would like to have that word removed from my vocabulary. It's not going to happen, but I don't even like to talk about masculinity, because I just don't think it serves any meaningful purpose.
Yeah. And the energy, I think that's, I love leaning more that way on the energy of people. And again, just being human. And everyone has different energies, no matter what gender you are. But what you do with that energy is very important. And I think I always talk about Ace and the energy that he gives off. It brings in a lot of people. People want to be around his energy a lot of the time, because it is very secure and confident, which people may associate with being more, I don't know, alpha male. But he also has this very tender, thoughtful energy as well, which people may stereotypically associate being more of the feminine, female energy. And I think that's it's important. I'm glad you brought up the energy part of it, because I think that is what I see in you, is that balance of energy that is very welcoming and is very comforting, And so, yeah, you're right. We don't even need to call it masculinity or femininity. We can just look at energy.
Energy, I love that word. Historically, the word gender in this country was associated with family and race, not biology or sex. And so on the plantation, our ancestors did not have a gender. They were not perceived as human. They were perceived as animal, barbaric, criminal, deviant, perverted, etc. So there was no boy, girl, male, female. There was no gender. Gender has a very different dynamic today. This is not my opinion. So that the idea of manhood, where does that come from? Like, who decided what is masculine, what is not? I didn't. My father didn't. His father didn't. So a lot of things that we take on as we perceive to be masculine. When I was a little boy, for example, I liked to wash dishes, but my father would tell me, you need to take out the garbage. And I said, why? He said, because you're a boy. Why should I have to take out the garbage because why can't my sister do it? Because she's a girl. So I grew up with these gender norms in my family that I resented and rebelled against, because I didn't think they were true to my spirit, but I couldn't tell my father that because he was going to take off the belt. You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
there was always punishment coming if I expressed myself.
Yeah.
That's another reason why I call the book Cultural Silence, because we were silenced as kids. You know, kids are supposed to be seen and not heard. You know, don't ask too many questions. Go to your room. Go watch TV. Like, I got dismissed a lot, and not just me. I see how kids, you know, don't become adults because they're still holding on to all of that resentment and frustration and confusion and hurt because they never had a voice because of their gender. You know, if you're a boy, you're supposed to play basketball. Well, I played tennis, right? And I was good, but I got called a sissy because they said tennis was a sissy sport. So I had to deal with that nonsense. And so forth and so on around gender. Just because of my gender, you're telling me I can't wear orange, I can't wear pink, I can't wear yellow. So I would come out of the house looking like a black bag of Skittles. It's to make people mad. I mean, I'm a Leo too. I love bright colors, but I was told because of my gender, I'm not supposed to wear certain colors.
Mm.
Who made this stuff up?
Right. And yeah, it's wild. The rules that we hold ourselves to just because, and who knows who made it up? Who knows who told us that? But despite that, and despite even maybe the unsafety of expressing yourself, you still did, it sounds like. How did you get to that point where you were still able to express yourself in that circumstance?
Honestly, you know, the opposite of love is indifference. And sometimes I would just have an attitude of indifference. I just stopped caring about other people's opinions because that basically took away whatever power I thought I had. I was so invested in what you thought about me. And so my image at one point was more important than having some integrity. I became very codependent. You know, I wanted to please everyone. I wanted everyone to like me. But today, you know, I like myself. So when I walk out the door, I'm not looking for people to like me and accept me because I've learned how to do that for myself. And that's the attraction. You know, people feel safe in my spirit because they know that I'm not going to harm them. I don't gossip. I don't disrespect people, you know, and that makes a big difference. And that's the energy. It's not gender. It's not masculine. It's just the energy that people can sense, whether you're 4 years old or 80 years old, people can sense your genuine energy, and it's attractive. And some people want to be around it. Some people are threatened. Some people get jealous. That's just, you know, but the energy to me is more important than the identities and the labels and stuff like that, because that can get caught in division as well.
For sure. And that self-love is so key, because if you don't have that, then I think when you say other people are threatened sometimes by your energy, I think because they don't have self-love themselves. So it's bringing up something in them, right? And so that's what I always say. The key is focusing on your self-love first, because then you can give out more love after that. But oftentimes we do the opposite. Oftentimes we're like, how can I help this person, this person, this person, and give love out? And then we don't give love to ourselves a lot of the time, you know? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to you know, transformation, whether it's in society or the world or whatever in the system, that it starts inside, you know, yourself. And I heard you talk about this a bit too on a couple other videos, Mark, about, you know, liberation of the mind, or, you know, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, if we're quoting Bob Marley. And I think it's like, as a child, we go through this time period where we have an inner voice, whether you want to call it God or your conscience, or lots of people call it different things. But then we experience so many contradictions, just like you were talking about with the gender norms. And we ask people and we repeat these questions in our mind, these contradictions, but most of the time people can't answer them. And so eventually we become kind of cut off from that voice because we start to believe other things. And that's when our mind becomes enslaved, if you want to say, or it becomes entrapped or captivated. And, you know, we grow up, and for many of us, it kind of hardens us because as a child, we were how we might perceive naive. being perceived as naive or something like that, and viewed the good in the world and things like that. And then, like I said, the world hardens, and the next thing you know, our minds captivated, and we have to come to a point as an adult where we're able to kind of push aside all of that stuff and free up our mind and our consciousness. And I think when you look at a lot of even like a lot of Black leaders over history, whether it's Malcolm X or Bob Marley, whatever, they're talking about this, emancipation from the self, or freeing our own mind from how it's captivated. And at least that's what comes to me.
And evolution. I think both of the Bob and Malcolm X, both is the evolution of self. Like, they didn't always have it, right? But they were vulnerable enough to share how it evolved. And I think that's key. We forget about that a lot of the time, that it's okay to evolve. It's actually wonderful to evolve and to change and to shift. And other people may look down on your evolution and say, oh, you've changed so much. But now I've learned in myself, because I've had that quite often, of you've changed, and that it's a compliment to me now. Whereas before I would feel quite insecure about it. And I'm
Why
sure,
do you
Mark,
think
your
change
evolution
is-
too.
Why do you think sometimes change is perceived as something that's bad or wrong? What
I
do you think that is?
think, yeah, I think if you grow up in a certain way and then your own mind starts to evolve and open up and you see different perspectives, but the group that you were once a part of and connected to is still in the same mindset and unchanged and holding on to things that maybe do not serve them and no longer serve you. And once you start changing, I think a couple things. I think it brings up insecurity in other people because they are not ready, or they just do not feel that change is necessary, or whatever it is. But I think, like you said too, it could be a threat. It seems that, why are you doing this? Do you think you're better than someone else, or it's threatening? Those are the sort of things I've seen with changes. And also, I would say, working in the Alaska Native community, some people are perceived of, if they go off into college or something like this, similar to what you mentioned at the beginning, of why are you trying to pursue like the white man's world or things like this. But they see a passion and they want to go there, or they want to go into social work and they want to be able to help their community. And I think that change also is seen as a threat to the culture, but also a threat to, I don't see that perspective right now. My mind's not open to that. Why are you? It's a misunderstanding. So I think there's a lot of different reasons for change.
Yeah, I asked that because I was reminded. I just had a memory. I went to my high school 25th year reunion, and so everyone there was 25 years older, but we didn't really have a connection. Like, I didn't have very many friends in high school, And one of the person came to me and said, "Mark, you haven't changed a bit." And then someone said, "Yeah, he hasn't changed," and I'm like, "It's been 25 years." And it was weird to me that they would say that I haven't changed just based on my physical appearance. Like, because what else do you have to go? You don't know me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But why would you say, and other people have said this to me along my journey, you haven't changed. If I haven't changed, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
But they don't know that. And for some reason, people believe that when you change, it's almost like you've abandoned them in some sense.
Exactly.
It's sad.
Yeah. They were looking at it superficially, of we see you, but we don't really see you. We just see, what's standing in front of us. It's a very superficial, like, level of we see you. That's interesting.
And that person's lens may not have changed, over the years. They may be seeing things through the same lens. That's what I notice oftentimes when, you leave somewhere and you go back to where you grew up. And I'll talk to people, and it seems like they're, kind of I've, kind of moved out of that stream of consciousness, and they're still flowing in it because they haven't left and they haven't moved on from it. But I think people also don't like change because of how uncomfortable it makes us feel. it makes, when you change and your perspective changes, then things start to unravel, like things that you thought you knew, or things that you thought you believed in, or the things that you did believe in but you became disillusioned by. um, those walls start to crumble, and that's uncomfortable. And if they crumble for me, and then I come when I'm talking to you about it, well, it's going to make you uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
because you still have some of those same foundations of contradictions that have been built up by this world we live in. And of course it's going to make you uncomfortable. I think about the topic of, we talk about health, and one of the things we talk about is what we're consuming. Like, so for example, if we're talking about food, people consuming soda, it's one of the biggest things that I feel like we get pushback on, is when we start talking about soda and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, sugar and health. And um, I think I remember when I was a teenager and I had acne, they sent me to a dermatologist, and he told me to stop drinking soda, stop eating that stuff, stop drinking that stuff. And I thought it was so ridiculous that he would ask me to do something like how would I stop doing that? And I feel like when we bring something like that up to other folks, it's that those same walls are still there. Like, that's the culture we
Yeah.
live in. You don't live without without that kind of stuff. And obviously there's um, things with much bigger consequence than soda. But we do have a question in the chat. We want to take it.
Mm-hmm.
And Lee, thanks for your gratitude. And I'm not sure what you mean by the first question, so if you want to expand on that and let us know what you're referencing, we'll answer it.
Oh, I think that was when Mark was talking about the 3 questions in the book, and she mentioned also on top of that, how can I help someone else?
I see.
Yeah, it was adding that question.
You want to say anything about it, or?
No, I just think that's very valid. Of if we start from ourselves, like where can we get help, and all of this stuff, and then after that, how can I help someone else? I think is the step maybe that sometimes we put first, and I think we need to switch it. Oftentimes, it's not selfish to look at how can I help myself first, because that's what we need to help other people, and we can do it alongside each other. But I think just not neglecting the self as well, I think is important.
Why is it sometimes perceived as being selfish when you want to take care of your needs first?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great question, because I think society has made it so that we need to be constantly hustling and grinding and giving outward energy, external energy. That sometimes that in looking inward, going inward and focusing on ourselves, I don't know, it's perceived as selfish a lot of the time, because we should be putting all our energy outward. And I think there's a lot of intentional harm that's done with that, because then it stops us from evolution and loving ourselves and being well, because if we're constantly energy outward, we're not refueling ourselves, and then we buy into all the pharmaceutical and medical sphere. But that's probably a whole other conversation. But yeah, I think it's seen as selfish because we're told that we need to give our energy outward to society, to our job, that it's seen as selfish. What do you think, Mark?
It's has always baffled me, because I'm learning I need to take care of what's on the inside, my body, mind, and spirit, because I don't want to pour from an empty vessel.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had the experience of overextending myself, saying yes when I want to say no, not knowing how to say no because I'm feeling guilty or bad or whatever, and learning what my spiritual needs are. I have a need to feel safe.
Yeah.
So if I don't feel safe, I'm going to remove myself. But I've been called selfish because I didn't want to go to this club or this party. I didn't want to hang out socially because it was an environment like in my neighborhood. It's a holiday, and people like to drink and eat and smoke, and it's not a safe environment. But I can be perceived as selfish because I don't want to be with them. Not that I don't respect you. I just don't want to be in that. That energy is not good for my spirit.
Yeah.
But that's perceived as being selfish. It's a balancing act.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
it goes back again to, it makes other people uncomfortable and feel insecure about their choices. When you make a choice for yourself, I think it triggers things in other people. And that's what I've learned, is to let go of worrying so much about what that has triggered in someone else, because they need to do their own work on that.
Mm.
I'm protecting my energy. And if that brings up something in you, then maybe that plants a seed for maybe in the future to protect your own energy, you know? And I think we got to think more about not people pleasing and looking after our own energy and being a role model, I think, for other people, that it's okay. It's not selfish at all to take care of your own energy.
Yeah, I think that's an important lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Some people learn it, some people don't. It took me a long time,
Yeah.
but I need to take care of me first before I go out and try to help somebody else.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure.
That's been,
Go back to Monica's question.
Yeah, just a second though.
Mhm.
In Gabor Mate's The Book of the Myth of Normal, that's what one of the big, it has a whole chapter based on that, about folks coming across as selfless, but they're not even taking care of them. They're not taking care of themselves. And obviously, as this is a social work podcast, and Mark, you just said it, you're not able to help other people if you haven't helped yourself first. And so in a way, the most selfless thing that you can do is take care of yourself, because
Yeah.
it's going to put you in a position, to where you're able to help yourself. And, by completing that prerequisite, you're then able to go out and help other people and make changes in other people's lives and whatnot.
Which is so, sorry, just one, it's so counter to traditional social work nowadays, not where it started from, but nowadays it's like grind, work 60 hours a week, take care of your clients, and then do a little self-care, go to this self-care conference, right? But it's actually not self-care at all. And so that's what we are pushing so much with revolutionary social work is take care of yourself, so then you can take care of other people. And yeah, we got to get rid of that hustle culture, especially in social work.
Yeah, it's looked at as
I
like,
have a really good friend who's a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And when I told him about this podcast, he told me he never heard of revolutionary social work.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent him the link. Hopefully he's listening.
Awesome.
Because what you guys are doing is pretty radical. And
Thank you.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate it. I respect it. And I'd like to see more revolutionary social workers.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
social
Can I
work
just ask
is,
you another question, though?
Say it again.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
So, how did you determine the name of this podcast?
What's that?
yeah, it just kind of went through the kind of a natural progression. We had this idea that we called a conscious party that, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years ago started up, and just viewing like we wanted to create a party, more than a couple of us, that, we're focusing on consciousness and elevating our consciousness together. And so it went through some things, some ups and downs, and changes in technology in the world, and found me at the University of Alaska hosting the Critical Social Worker, a revolutionary storytelling podcast. And I really had liked what I had built there, but I felt like something was missing, that it wasn't exactly the title and everything. The concept and the title were cool, but that they were missing something. And so I was going, after some deep reflection, I was going to rebrand that podcast as the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, so that we could, because I wanted to move away from critical social work. I thought what we were trying to do was something different. And so I was going to rebrand that. But then Alicia and I found ourselves, even after I'd have a conversation with somebody on the other podcast, we'd find ourselves in these deep conversations. And we're like, well, we just got to have these record these and put them out there for people. And that's going to be our way to connect with others. And through that process, and those conversations and everything, that's how the idea of revolutionary social work really got framed, and creating a value system, kind of defining it a little bit more. And so essentially it's revolutionary social work because, there's a lot of different ways that people use revolutionary, right? People talk about the Revolutionary War. Black Panthers use, revolutionary. People talk about revolutionizing the mind. And I think the way that we look at it is that social work is so deep in the status quo that, like, your friend said that they hadn't heard of revolutionary social work. It'd be very hard to in the current landscape of social work, because everybody's so intertwined with the status quo, the powers that are already in place. so they're not able to get information from anywhere else or anywhere different. And so we just looked at it as social work needs something different. Social work needs a value-based system that allows us to unweave some of the contradictions that are inherent in the profession right now. It needs to broaden it. I feel like social work's been reduced to where it's just a profession by people from licenses and education that's has gatekeepers that prevent people from accessing it. Where I view there's people just like you, Mark, that you may not have an official social work title or a license, but you're doing revolutionary social work.
Yep.
And so we did that as the title of it is exactly what it says, something that's always revolving, something that's always changing. And it's doing exactly what we hoped it would. And it's connecting us with people like you. And we found that the deeper we've gone with it, we might have had more interactions. I don't know if more interactions, right? We may have had, sought out more interactions at the beginning, but the more that it's been built and, like I said, the values and everything have unfolded, the more meaningful that the relationships have gotten. So when we are connecting with someone like you, Mark, or like someone like Kyle last week, among other people, like those relationships are deep and they're meaningful, and we're really making progress in our consciousness, I believe, and hopefully creating this revolutionary movement within social work so we can I don't know, like picture the Bob Marley album cover, with him,
The Uprising.
the uprising coming out of the mountain. And I feel like that's what social work needs, is we need to find something that's relational so we can see each other and hear each other again. And I know that was a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how we got to the name Revolution.
It's attractive. It's attractive and it's fascinating. I'm intrigued. It's part of the reason why I agreed to do this, because it's something I've never heard of before, something I've not experienced. And I love to learn new ideas and beliefs and attitudes, and that's what you guys are offering. So thank you. Yeah.
And that's why it's important. It's a value-based system. We're not telling you what to do. We're not telling social workers what to do. We're offering these values for people to reflect on for themselves. And so it's very much driven by connecting with each other, and then you sharing it with someone you're connected to, and them reflecting on the values. And if it aligns with them, then they share it. And that's how this is going to grow, revolutionary social work. It's not going to be we're standing here saying this is what you need to do. It's going to be driven organically and grow organically by people sharing and connecting with the values. So, yeah.
It's definitely an each one teach one spirit.
Definitely.
Like it's relational, and we all have relationships. So this is just another way to relate and connect with people around the world. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm going to be your spiritual cheerleaders.
I
love that. I love it.
Yeah, I think too, just to continue the conversation just a little bit further, when we were talking about self-care earlier, social work, and the status quo looks at it as a box to be checked. Like you said, I attended this and I got my CEUs and I learned about self-care. But I used to remark when I was deep into undergrad education and all that, and the job that I had, is that I needed self-care to do all the self-care shit that they were telling me to do, when all I needed was really some time and some space to reflect and things like that. And I think it just goes back to what we've kept repeating, is that the whole idea of transformation starts with the self, and that if you're so caught up in completing all the tasks that social work gives for you, between the education, licensing requirements, trying to pay your bills, everything else, is that it's kind of the antithesis of it at some point, if you know what I'm saying. Like it doesn't provide the very space that you need to do something like that. And then we're moving more and more to these online, whether it's education or therapy or elsewhere, and it's all done via the computer, done, we call it asynchronous, not synchronized with each other. We don't share physical space. Is that we're just becoming more and more disconnected from each other. And, that's a bad way for something like social work to go.
Yeah. But it's change. Again, it's change from the status quo. So it makes people uncomfortable. And that's what we're up against. But that is okay. We will fight that battle. And I think this goes back to Monica's question. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Mark, on, she says, do you have any advice as to how to help others understand that mindset, that change can be seen as a positive, not a negative?
Well, I don't like the word advice. Because it just seemed to be like an intellectual hierarchy attached to it.
Mm,
I don't see myself as an expert, but I do believe in just sharing my truth, my experience, and that's enough, And in sharing my experience, it led me to you, and it's a good question. It's a great question. But I really hesitate on giving advice. I speak for myself. I don't speak for all Black men.
mhm.
You mentioned Bob Marley, you mentioned Malcolm X, who I love and adore. I don't believe one person can speak for all people. And I think that's the danger when people try to give advice. Maybe a suggestion or recommendation might be a little softer way to put it. But I like my mother taught me to lead by example.
Mm,
So that's what's in my heart, is to lead by example. And it doesn't have to be something I wrote down on paper either. Just the example of being kind to my neighbor.
yeah.
That's something you can take with you for the next generation. Just being kind to my neighbor is a way for me to demonstrate change, because other neighbors are not so kind.
Yeah.
So sometimes I may be the kindest person in my building because everyone's busy gossiping and stealing stuff in the hallway. You get stuff from Amazon in the hallway, and then it's gone,
Mm.
and you know who took it.
You stay kind.
Yeah, that's the challenge. It's not
Mm-hmm.
to react the way I used to, but to just, okay, let me forgive, right? I need to be forgiving. That's another way to heal, is to be forgiving. And when I share that forgiving spirit, that's another way to show change.
Mm. Yeah.
I hope I answered the question.
Beautifully.
It can be hard. Change is hard. We covered a lot of reasons why change is hard earlier, but and we live in a day and world where everything is recorded for the most part. You could write something online or been recorded saying something a long time ago, and people hold when you change from something, they hold it against you. It's not there. There's very little incentive from the powers that be, the status quo, to change. You're supposed to remain the same. You change a sports team, then you're a traitor. You changed political sides or something, then why did you say this before? There's what I'm saying. There's not a lot of incentive in the culture, the main or broad culture, excuse me, the mainstream broad culture, to have that change. And so I just want to say that, Monica, although I don't have a perfect advice for you or anything either, I just think that to empathize with you, that change is hard. Like,
Mhm.
they've set it up as hard in this society. It's hard to leave something behind and to move on to something new. Everybody is going to hold you accountable to that. And so it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to be willing to change.
Mhm.
But again, I would say it starts within ourselves. It starts with that self-reflection, to that listening to that inner voice. Um, I think even creating something like a value system. I know we talk about it for revolutionary social work, but for ourselves as well, having
Yeah.
values. You've talked about it a lot of times. Not maybe you don't know what to do in a certain situation, but you always know who to be in that situation. Living up to our values, things like that. And just by setting a value system, you're going to change, right? Because you're going to hold yourself, if you have it written down, you're going to hold yourself accountable to that,
Mm.
which is going to lead to revolutionary change from my perspective.
Yeah. And I
Well,
think
thank you
if
for
you,
mentioning courage, because Maya Angelou says that courage is the most important of all virtues,
Mm.
because without courage, you can't practice the other ones consistently.
Mhm.
And I think it
Yeah.
does take courage to change. But sometimes that courage may not be affirmed by someone that you love and care about, because they haven't left the block.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And I think once you have that courage, and once you feel more confident, maybe confidence not the right word, but that you feel like I feel it aligned and connected with the change I'm making, then I think you can feel better about other people not understanding. Because as long as you do and you feel aligned with it, then it's not as important if other people share that mindset or support you in that. Support's important, but if you align with it, I think that's the key. And that's where the self-work keeps going. And like all of us have said, is being that role model then of, okay, I'm doing the work. And then if other people see you doing that for years and years and years, and then you get happier and healthier and you're on that healing path, then I mean, what can anyone say? You know?
When I
So
was 26, I moved from Chicago to New York,
mm,
and I had no apartment, no jobs, no friends. I had $500 in my pocket, and I said, I'm coming to New York because I decided I was going to become an actor and a model.
mm,
And when I was in therapy, I realized those were two maths that I needed to take off because I had no intention of being an actor or model, but it sounded good. It got me attention, and it helped me to redirect my pain. So the more I talked about acting and modeling, the less I could talk about how I really felt about myself on the inside.
yeah.
But nobody supported me moving to New York. And I mean, nobody. That added to the loneliness coming here in New York there's no place like New York. Have you guys ever been to New York before?
Mm-hmm. Not for long periods of time though.
Just for
Yeah.
a couple days.
Yeah.
It was culture shock in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 10 million people here. It's a lot of people, and there's New York. You got people from all over the world, and sometimes people don't know about the culture of their indigenous neighbor. They don't know about their customs, their traditions. If I go to a Chinese food restaurant, for example, they won't put the money in my hand. Little things like that, and I may react a certain way because I think you're not being friendly, but I don't know. I didn't know that's the culture, So there's so much to unlearn. But anyway, it took a lot of courage to come here.
Yeah.
It wasn't a wise decision. I realize that now, but I mean, obviously God was the best of all planners, and so He knew what I was doing. But I wouldn't advise somebody to do that. To just move to another city with $500 and no apartment, no job, no friends, no family.
Mm-hmm. You can kind of
I don't think
relate
that's a
to
wise
that.
decision.
That's how I met Alicia, moving to Honolulu, Hawaii, with a little bit of money,
More
and
money. Uh-huh.
making it happen.
Yeah. Wow.
It's not for everybody, but sometimes you got to make a jump as a human being, as a man, whatever. You have to make a jump, and you got to follow wherever your heart, is leading
Yeah,
you.
I mean, I'm glad I did it. But if I
Yeah.
look back now, I would not do that
Not easy.
Well, sticking to that word courage, I'm teaching a substance abuse course. I actually have a few students in here from the class right now, and in recovery, like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, they use the Serenity Prayer where they talk about, God, grant me the courage to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So it's asking for courage to accept things that you cannot change. Whereas Angela Davis has a counter where she says, I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I can no longer accept. So I was wondering what you all two thought about that, the balance, because there's obviously a power in humility as well, like in that Serenity Prayer, and accepting that a lot of drug addicts running around thinking that they're going to, this addicted to power as well, thinking that they can change everything. And so accepting that you can't do that, and, turning like in AA and NA, it would be turning yourself over to a higher power and whatnot. But then Angela Davis's version, is telling you like, hey, you actually can change these things, and you have the power to do so. So stop accepting them and change them. And I think, but I found value in both of those in my life. But what do you think about it? How do you balance those two?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of power in acknowledging what you're no longer going to accept, and knowing that I think people don't realize how much power they have in a lot of situations. Um, but then I also always talk about control the controllables, because it can get overwhelming if you think you have the power to change everything, and then you lose the motivation to do anything. So I think there is, like you say, like a balance with it. There is a humility to knowing that you cannot change everything and control the controllables. But also I think what Angela Davis is saying is like, get off your butt. You have power to do a lot more than you actually think you can, or that you're saying you can. So I love that part, because I think it's empowering, and it gets people moving, and shakes you out of that, like, I'm just stuck here. I can't move. I can't do anything. So yeah, I think it's balance between them.
I think people too often, you hear people often say, that's just the way that I am.
Yeah.
And I think that that's conducive to sometimes acceptance of certain things. Yeah, you may have had a certain life experience, you may be feeling a certain way, but I don't think that it's just the way that you are. Again, it goes back to this, we're so resistant to change, to even the belief that we have the ability to change. So I think it takes, I think it does take courage to accept things and not to force things your way. But I think at the same time, real courage is found in, even like going back to change, change in the world, it starts with changing yourself. And it takes some courage to look in there and do that and know, or even create the space that you need for change.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson said, I'm starting with the man in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And that had a global impact on people and the way that their attitude, He said, let me look at myself first, and then, I'll do something to be of service to the world. But I need to take a look at me first. That takes courage to look inward.
Yeah.
He wanted to clean his own house. I always like that. And I like both. You mentioned serenity prayer, which that's a really long prayer too, by the way. But I like what Angela Davis said as well. I think there's value in both. I don't think you necessarily have to choose one or the other. So I like them both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And knowing that you don't have to choose one or the other, that I think that's like a life lesson for many things, right? Like you don't have to choose this and stay there. If we talk about politics, I think that's a big one that people say, well, you have to be on this side. If you're not on this side, then it means you're on this side. And that's not true. And it's the same here. You can take parts of it, and it one may be more true for you in one season of your life than the other one. And knowing that that's okay too. Yeah, you can have both. But I always love when you bring that up, because it's important to reflect on. It really is.
Yeah, it's
I
important.
remember telling someone, or asking a woman, I had to go to jury duty. And I said to a woman, she was behind the counter, I said, how's your spirit today? That's how I greeted her.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing she said to me was, what church do you go to? And I said, I don't go to church. She said, do you believe in God? I said, yeah. And I said, God is within me. Why did I say that? And you mentioned choice. So some people believe they have to choose between religion or spirituality.
Yeah.
That's probably another podcast.
We could get deep into that.
But just the idea that if I tell you I have an intimate relationship with a loving God, and your first reaction is, what church do you go to? Who's your pastor? What's your congregation singing? That's a disconnect.
Yeah.
Because you've already imposed your beliefs on me, and you don't even know me. You just heard me say I have a relationship with a loving God. Because of all the stuff that we've been socialized and programmed and conditioning. Not that I'm right and you're wrong, you're right and I'm wrong, but why does it have to be either or?
Yeah.
Can I believe in God right now and not go anywhere to demonstrate that belief? But for some people, that's blasphemy and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I can't change. I can't change your belief system.
No.
So I'm not even going to try.
You don't need to.
No. because it's not about me.
Mm-hmm.
And my beliefs are not about you. Can we coexist in peace and harmony in this
Right.
moment?
Are you a fellow
You
human
believe
being?
this? I believe that. Can we still coexist on the planet right here, right now, and have our difference of belief? I can still love and respect you, but I just don't believe, I don't believe in the Mets or the Yankees. Why I got to choose between the Mets or the Yankees?
Mm-hmm.
Can I go to the Mets game and the Yankees game? In this city, there's so much hatred in sports. It's just an analogy, but if you don't like the Mets, then you have to like the Yankees, and it's crazy.
Yep.
I don't believe that, but that's where I live. I got to choose a Mets or the Yankees. It's got to be the Jets or the Giants, and so I don't like that.
Yeah.
Too much
That
work.
is so many things. It just comes up in so many ways. Politics, sports, life, friendships, work is this or
Music.
that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When
Music
I
as
was a
well.
kid, I grew up listening to Elton John, Phil Collins, Janis Joplin, Marvin Gaye,
Mm.
Sam Cooke, Billie Holiday. But my culture was questioned because I like pop and rock and soul and R&B.
Yep.
I wasn't supposed to have an eclectic taste. So now people question my blackness because I like Genesis. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
How could you like Earth, Wind, and Fire and the Beatles? I had those battles as a kid. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You've experienced similar things to that, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's all tied to the establishment again, and it's what's established is what you're supposed to and I think even with sports, what you're talking about, the establishment is that you're supposed to stick to a sports team and participate in the tribalism.
Mm-hmm.
With music, you're supposed to like something, oftentimes based on your perceived racial identity, but many other things. You know what I mean? I think I experience the opposite to some degrees. People say, "Why do you listen to black music?" Or that's not for you, and maybe some of it's not, but that's another discussion as well. Um, but I think it's just like, for me, it's like same thing like you. What do you mean? I like it. It's good. It's good. It's good music. I don't really look at it
Mm-hmm.
like that. But in
Yeah.
this world, we're so forced to do so, and even back to what you're talking about, the religion. Your spirituality isn't relevant unless you can tie it to an already established, you know, organized religion or something like that. Whereas when I hear the religious leaders that I respect say something, they always say that to look within, that God is within you. Even Jesus said it, the kingdom of heaven is within you. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just interesting. Again, the many contradictions that are present in our life, and um, how much they're often tied to some kind of a literal establishment, or an established way that we are supposed to do things or operate, or the way that we're supposed to think. And we're the ones that hold each other accountable to it, like you
Yeah.
said.
We hold each other to it. And because I think if you're doing these things on your own, you're doing your own self work, God is within you, I consciousness, like within Rastafari, these sort of things I think are threatening to the status quo, because if you're part of an organized, whether it be a sports team or it be an organized religion, then there's a certain level of control people have over what you believe and how much you evolve and what you do, really. There's a lot of shame that comes with some organized religions, that if you step outside of the box, then, like you're saying, blasphemy, there's a lot of shame and guilt that comes with that. And so again, I think there's a lot of intentionality behind pushing people into these tribes and organizations and not encouraging people to think for themselves, essentially, is what it is.
If you can find God within yourself, then what do you need the pastor for?
Right. Right.
Don't tell him that though.
Yeah.
Don't tell him
Yeah.
that. He's gonna make sure you show up on Sunday.
Yeah.
Ask me 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
Take your rent money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Susan Taylor says that I've been to the church, I've been to the mosque, I've been in the synagogue, I've been to the temple, but the spirit is where truth lives.
Mm.
And that really helped me a lot.
Yeah.
That's on the inside, and I don't like to debate truth. So what I perceive as true may be different for yourself,
Mm,
but it's the way I see it. My understanding, my interpretation, my perspective, it's not negotiable, you know?
mm-hmm.
So, but that's where division, you mentioned the word division, I like that word. Um, People get divided because of their belief systems,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Money, religion, sexuality,
Yeah.
gender, politics, music. I mean, there's just so much. And where's the soul? You know, Public Enemy says, "Who stole the soul?" You
Mm-hmm.
know, somebody stole the soul, and they're getting paid for
Yes.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, follow the money a lot of the times, and you can find some sort of reason of why it's happening. But yeah, I think my favorite conversations are when I'm talking to people from all different backgrounds and different religions, different perspectives, and that you can actually dialogue and listen to each other. Not that you're debating or arguing for one truth over the other, but you're just dialoguing. And yeah, it is beautiful. And that's what Ace does a lot of talking circles within his classes, even though they are online, and it's dialogue, right? People are listening to each other and respecting each other's different views. And you've always said there's never been like an argument within a talking circle.
No, I've done facilitated probably 1,000 talking circles, and
Mm-hmm.
there's never been any kind of violent argument within there. But I think it goes back to, like what Ilarion Merculi, if he's a Unangan elder up in Alaska, and he would just say that in the talking circle, I can have my truth, and you can be across the circle, and you can have a different truth, and we can honor both of those truths just by listening to each other. You don't have to automatically agree or disagree with what they have to say. You can hear what they say, honor their experience, honor their truth, and then the real change happens, in between all that. When I authentically and deeply listen to you, even if your truth is different, well, just like what pretty much happened to me is that you listen and you hear, and all of a sudden you become more attuned to that other person's truth, and you're hearing the stories behind the truth, and all of that is that a change starts to happen within yourself. And then the
Mm.
next time you show up to the circle, you're even a little bit more open to that other person's truth, and maybe that person's truth actually became a little bit a part of your own truth, and that's where the real meaningful change happens. So, I think oftentimes we think that unity means that we all have to be the exact same, but unity should honor differences. It doesn't have to. It doesn't mean we all have to experience the same things or the same feelings or have the same exact truths. Um, like Mark, you and I, we may have a lot of things in common, but obviously our life experience growing up in different locations, different, racial backgrounds, all of that is gonna it's gonna result in some differences, in the way that we perceive things, in our experience, and the truths that we feel. And so, I just concur with Hilarion that, um, we're able to both have different truths and still honor each other by listening to each other. And hopefully through that, we become closer together and more unified as a process of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's revolutionary social work.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I love it. I
Yes.
I I love it. I'm a fan.
And we love, I mean, the revolutionary social work that you're doing, Mark, and all the work that you're doing in your community and what you've shared with the book is huge. And it's that revolutionary social work in action that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really
I'm
appreciate it.
also I'm working on an independent documentary on the journey of Black men and their mental health.
Mm.
And we've cultivated an intergenerational and multicultural tribe of men and women across diaspora to be part of this project. It's in the embryonic stages. And I know we're live and I'm taking a risk, but I would be so honored if you would both consider being a part of this project.
Oh, that would
Um,
be amazing.
yeah, we had a virtual gathering last month. There were people from the States, Canada, UK, South Africa, Nigeria, Uganda. I'm on social media and I contact people from around the globe because I'm a global citizen. I
Mm-hmm.
live in New York, but I'm a global citizen.
Yeah.
And that's my self identity. That's my truth. you know. And I would be honored if you would consider being a part of this documentary.
We're honored that you, well, I speak for myself. I'm honored that you would ask us to be a part of it. And it would be incredible. I'll speak for you.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm honored that you asked, and everything that I know about you up to this point, I respect you 100%, and just honored that to be connected with you on such a project.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I know I took a risk in life.
Yeah.
I'll contact you, and
Yeah.
details and stuff like that. We're going to be having another gathering virtually next month. I'll let you know about it. And just to get people who are behind the scenes, in front of the camera. I have a dynamic producer who he has worked with. His name is Gregory Gates. He's worked with Stevie Wonder, Madonna, Beyonce, Michael Jackson, Post Malone, Lady Gaga, Mary J. Blige, so forth and so on. I've known him for over 25 years. He's in my corner. This is my first time doing this. I've never been a documentary filmmaker. But if I can author and edit a book, I can be a documentary filmmaker. I believe in myself.
Yes.
So I'm asking people from around the world to join me because I think it's important, and I think for the next generation, they'll have some examples of what they can do to heal, what to do, where to go, who to talk to. And they'll meet people like yourself who they've never seen before, but they hear you share and they see your energy and they'll see the attraction. And maybe that will inspire them to do something different, whatever that different is.
Yeah.
It can mean walking around the block for half an hour. They've never done that before. It may mean going to the park and watching the ducks and the kids and just being okay with the water just sitting there, right? It may mean looking at a podcast and listening and getting some new ideas and new beliefs. And, there's so many things we can do differently, but we need access. We need connection, and we need a sense of belonging. And I feel appreciated today because people have connected with my spirit because they see I'm trying to do something to be of service, and I see that's what you're doing as well. That's why I'm asking you to join me. So thank you.
Thank you. What an amazing project. That's so exciting. So a lot of appreciation for you.
Cultural Silence and Wounded Souls. That's the working title.
Amazing. It could evolve. And that's okay.
I don't know, but that's where we're at right now. And have you seen the documentary by Ava DuVernay called 13th? So that documentary is my blueprint. It's my inspiration. It's my template. I don't want to duplicate her genius, but I want to emulate her brilliance.
Nice.
And she interviewed like 43 people. So I'll be doing the interviewing and from around the world. And I'm so excited. I'm excited.
This is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for being willing to come on board.
Yeah, I think that's a good blueprint. It's been a while since we watched that, but she did a really good job at like you said, collecting a ton of different perspectives.
We hosted a few viewings of 13th, didn't we?
Yeah, that was actually it's funny to talk about. You asked where Revolutionary Social where it came from. The very first, when it was in its infancy as a conscious party, we used to host meetups of documentaries, and I think we watched the Black Panther documentary. We did one on the MOVE organization and watched 13th. And we just have people come over and have dialogue about it. And it was very powerful.
Yeah.
It is. It's an hour and 40 minutes. She interviewed 43 people, mostly men. I really do have people who are so different from around the world, but they're out here making a difference in the lives of other human beings. And to me, that's attractive, And sometimes that's the hope shot. It's seeing someone that you don't know, that you've never seen before, and you hear how they're coping, how they're healing, how they're overcoming, how they're persevering. And you go, well, if she can do it, if he can do it, maybe I can at least give it a try. So, I'm excited.
Oh, good things to come. So excited. And I appreciate everything, your spirit, your energy that you've shared today on the podcast. I know people already in the chat have thanked you and respected the responses that you've had to their questions. So thank you so much for that. I was just wondering to finish up if there's anything else on your heart that you wanted to share with us, with anyone listening.
Well, I do have a website,
Mhm.
Cultural Silence WoundedSouls.com. It's one word. On the website, there's a documentary, there's a podcast, there's an interview, there's poetry, there's music, there's a video, there's resources. There are books you can read, there are clinicians you can speak to, there are helplines you can call, there are websites you can access, there are podcasts you can listen to. It's a great way to connect around the world with people who can help you, hopefully give you some type of solace and comfort in what you're going through. So I want to encourage people to check out my website.
Thank you.
What was the site one more time?
Cultural Silence WoundedSouls.com.
Okay.
And can they get your book on there too? Is that the best place to find your book?
No, the book is on Amazon.
Amazon. So we'll get a link.
Yeah, it's on paperback and link on and Kindle.
Okay.
Nice.
So we'll get a link in
Yeah.
the description and whatnot. I'm a bit backed up with producing podcasts right now, but I'll get this up in the next 2 weeks or so. And I'll make sure to link your website and the book and everything that we put out there.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the link to the book is on my bio and on LinkedIn.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And Instagram and Facebook.
I can't wait to dive more into that book because just what you've put together and knowing your spirit and energy, I can only imagine the people that you've attracted to that book to be in there. So I'm really excited to dive deeper on it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow. Any last words from you?
No, I just want to say that I appreciate you, Mark. Appreciate you being a revolutionary social worker. I appreciate the time and the respect that you've shown to Alicia and I, and just much respect to you. And I hope that I look forward to hearing more about the documentary and, hope that we can continue connecting. But just a big thank you from my heart to mine, my family to yours. Nothing but respect for you. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day for this.
Thank you. It was such an honor. I'm so overjoyed. And like I said, you got a spiritual cheerleader now in New York City. I'm going to tell all my friends about you guys and make sure they connect with you as well. So I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that we're going to stay connected for sure. We'll look out for any more connection. Everyone, check out.
I love your energy together. I have to say that.
We're like a yin and a yang.
But it's so refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
It's so refreshing your energy is just so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. Thank you so much. Anyone listening right now, do check out the website if you wrote that down and Mark's social media, and you can find the book on there. So wish everybody a wonderful rest of the weekend. Peace, gratitude, drink all the water, get out in nature, love on each other. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, Mark. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.
Have a great day.
You too.